All right, let's do it. Are there any questions beforehand? How are we doing out there? Before we get started, are there any we need to talk about? How's the bingo going? I got my bingo. I haven't filled it in nearly as much as I thought I would have by now, I'll be honest. It's a little empty, but get in on that bingo. And if you want to participate and win some prizes, that's due February 4th, the night of February 4th. Okay, get your bingo cards. If you don't want to print them off, that's fine. You can just make your own, just copy it down on your own paper. It doesn't have to be anything. Okay, all right, let's do it. All right, so we're going to talk about its many forms. Then we're going to spend a lot of time on the impact that it has on the body. And then we're going to talk about all the places it is that you might not think it is. I might speed that section up a little bit because I feel like I got a little bit repetitive, but you just find sugar in so many things that I just was like, oh yeah, and that, and oh yeah, that. So we might speed through that one. And then we'll end a little bit of what to do about it, what to do about the sugar. Like, I don't want to call it an addiction, but you know, the propensity to indulge a little too much with the sugar. Struggling, but how's Sarah? So I don't know how it's going with you with being back. I know that Western just put out a statement today that we are going remote for at least 2 more weeks. How are you doing over there in the middle school, high school? Schools are okay, but weird. Are you guys back? Are you still in person? Are they considering going remote? Okay, you're still in person. Yeah. And I'm interested to see how this evolves. Yeah, I know I was a little disappointed to, to have to be remote again. But hey, this is our reality. Flexibility is important. So I was trying to just roll with it. Okay. All right, so sugar. Let's do some of the forms of sugar. Okay, so sugar is classified by how many molecules that are bonded to form it. So we've got one molecule, monosaccharides, literally translates to one sugar. And these are the most basic form of sugars that our body tries to work with. So this is glucose and fructose are the 2 main forms, galactose and mannose are other forms, but these are just 1 sugars. And disaccharides, 2, so 2 sugars. So sucrose is made up of glucose and fructose. Maltose is 2 glucose molecules. Lactose is a galactose and glucose. And this, so these are just some of the 2, right? And so you create these disaccharides by combining and bonding some of these monosaccharides. So glucose and fructose form to make sucrose, and sucrose is what we know as table sugar. Okay, that's the thing that we cook with, or we're putting in our cakes and our ice creams and all of that fun jazz. So sucrose is table sugar, and it's about 50% glucose and about 50% fructose. Okay. Polysaccharides just means many sugars. So you put a lot of those molecules together in some sort of bonded way, and they form different types of many sugars, and those polysaccharides come in 3 different forms. So we have our digestible ones, which are starches, like the starches that we know as potatoes and rice and our noodles. Okay, and all starches are long chains of glucose. Okay, so anytime that you're digesting a starch, what your body does is it breaks that down into its single glucose molecules. Then we have our partially digestible, and these are things like fruits that have some, this is when we start getting into what maybe you've heard as fiber. Okay, so this has some components within them that are not digestible. Okay, so they're not things that we absorb in our body. Sarah had said the delay was bugging her. I would think that would bug me too. If you do have the ability to Zoom and you'd prefer not to have a delay, I did post the Zoom link in the group. So if the delay bothers you on the Facebook Live, feel free to join me on Zoom. Okay. So partially digestible are things like fruits, have some partially indigestible parts. And then we have the, There you go. The indigestible. So these are the parts of like the vegetables that are not absorbed at all. Things like cellulose, like the walls of celery, right? And these all have very important roles within our system. So like the indigestible ones, this is what we call fiber. And fiber is actually really, really important to our digestive system. And it provides something for the GI tract, the bacteria within our GI tract, which is actually a really important part of our digestive process. It feeds them. Okay, fiber also adds bulk to our poo, right? So we have regular bowel movements. So even though there are things within these foods that we cannot absorb, they play other roles and they're really, really important. And in fact, and we'll come to this a little bit later, but it's kind of amazing how nature has kind of put these packages together in the form of fruits and vegetables so that we can get nutrients from them, we can get energy from them, and we can also get them to move through our system in a more efficient way with fiber. Once ingested, all of these things are broken down into monosaccharides. So your monosaccharides, your disaccharides, they're all broken down into one molecule. And they're typically broken down into glucose, fructose, and galactose. Okay, so our body goes through, it doesn't matter what form it goes in, it always comes out in these one molecule forms. Typically glucose and fructose are the two biggest ones. And those are the ones that make up sucrose, our table sugar, and they're released into the bloodstream. And they go into the bloodstream and then they go directly to the liver. Okay. Now the liver takes that and it replenishes, it stores glucose and it stores fructose. Okay, so what it does is it stores its own energy, or it stores, they're like energy backups, right? Because glucose is what fuels cellular respiration, which allows our cells to do all the things that they need to do to perform their jobs. And our brain runs off glucose, okay? So it stores what it thinks the body is going to need, right? And then it sends some into, so like what it's storing is like a backup battery, and then it sends what the body's going to need now into the bloodstream to be picked up by all of the other cells, and anything in excess of that. Okay? If there's any leftover glucose that it doesn't know, that it doesn't have a need for right now, it converts it to fat. Okay? This is what the liver does for us. Right, so this might be one of those misconceptions. People think that diet, like the fat on our bodies, is coming majorly from the dietary fat, and that's not actually true. Okay, our body has these mechanisms to convert these sugars into fats when it doesn't have a need to use the energy right now. Okay, so the liver's storing them, it's releasing extra stuff into the blood so that our cells can pick it up for energy, and then it's converting the rest to fat. Okay. Now these muscles also store glucose. Okay, it's they form bonds, and then that's called glycogen, but it's glucose. And the interesting thing about the muscles is that when it stores glucose, it can only be used by the muscle. Okay, so this is one of those things when I said, I think in the last presentation, I had said, hey, if you are going through a tough workout, if you push your body, if you're running those marathons, if you're lifting heavy, you should have a healthy carb after. And the reason is because you want to restore those glucose storage in your muscles to help them repair and recover. So it's really important, because that's how they get through the recovery. So when you're done working your body, have a healthy carb, right? Which is a sugar, okay? A healthy sugar. And the glucose, so they say that muscles are pretty selfish. When it stores glucose, it is only storing it for itself. The liver, however, is very generous. It stores this energy for the rest of the body. Okay, we need glucose. We need it for energy. It's the main source of fuel for our brains. Caveat here, I'm assuming that we are doing a balanced diet in this case, and we're not doing keto. Keto has ketones, and that's a totally different subject. It's neither bad nor good. It's just a definite energy source. However, our body uses glucose first, which is why if you've ever heard somebody say it's so easy to get knocked out of ketosis, it's because if you give your body too much glucose, then it's going to switch to that fuel source because it prefers glucose. Our brain prefers glucose first. Okay? But it's necessary, right? So sugar in and of itself is necessary for our health. Okay? It gives us brain, it runs our brains, and it drives our cellular respiration, which is you know, driving everything that our body is doing. And the muscles also need it for recovery, okay? All right, are there any questions up until this point? Okay, so basically all of the carbs, which are sugars, they all get broken down into basically glucose, and we'll talk about fructose here in just a minute. Okay, the glucose is then stored as a backup battery in the liver. It's released into the blood to get energy to the rest of the cells into the brain. And then the muscles rebuild, takes what it needs in order for it to recover. Any leftover is turned to fat. So that's kind of a summary of how sugars get metabolized through the body. Questions? Okay. If at any point in time you have one, please feel free to speak up. I'm more than happy to answer. Okay. So when we get too much, okay, this is the problem. Like glucose in and of itself, we need, okay? The problem is when we start giving it too much and we start overburdening the liver, okay? Because the liver is the thing that's processing all of the sugar that's coming into our body. It's taking out the glucose, it's delivering it to the blood, it's converting the excess to fat. It's really working hard to help regulate our blood sugar, okay? So when we start getting too much and it can't, you're basically making it work really, really, really hard, it starts doing things like storing fat within itself. Okay, and that causes things like fatty liver disease. Okay, so when we start overburdening the liver, we're saying more glucose, more glucose, more glucose, and the liver's like, whoa, I'm overworked, right? It feels like teachers do right now. You're overworking it, okay? And then it gets a little bit sick, right? Because it's trying to convert all of these things and manage all of these sugars, and it's just getting inundated over and over and over with no breaks. How we doing? Yes, we're all overworked, all them teachers. Man, hug a teacher. Oh. Okay, so let's talk about fructose. Fructose, if you've ever done any sort of research with sugar, fructose gets a terrible reputation. And it's warranted, okay, but let's talk about it. So fructose is the sugar that's typically found in fruit, okay? But here's the thing. So historically, when we were hunters and gatherers and stuff, we didn't actually have access to fruit all of the time. Fruit was a smaller portion of our diet. Okay, it's seasonal. It's hard to get. It's hard to get to on a continuous basis. It was one of those things that when we got fruit, we were really excited about it because that was like a treat. Okay, so because the majority of our diet were like vegetables and meat and fat, we didn't necessarily develop a good process for handling fructose on its own. However, when you get fructose through fruit, it is packaged beautifully with fiber. Like we talked about how fruits and vegetables have fiber in it. They have those partially and undigestible carbs in them, basically. Okay, so they're packaged, fructose is packaged with fiber and other really important nutrients. With that fiber, it slows down our digestion, which allows our body, our liver in particular, to keep up with processing. Okay, so fructose, when found in fruit, is not harmful because nature, in all of its beautiful glory, has packaged it beautifully with all of these other components. So when you sit down and you eat an apple, it slows down your digestion, you've got fiber in there, you're getting full, right? So you're not just blasting your system with fructose, okay? So I know that like, especially some diets now, keto, I keep keto's an easy out, but like keto sometimes says you can't have a whole lot of fruit. Okay, fruit is not the problem, right? We have to stop fearing fruit. It's a beautiful bundle of sugars that our body uses to get energy and fiber and nutrients that support our entire system. Okay, fruit is fine. What isn't fine is when we isolate fructose away from this perfectly beautiful package. This is where we get in trouble. So fruit, beautiful package. take away the package, and we have created a problem, okay? Fruit juice, even if it's 100% fruit juice, this is a problem, okay? Cokes, sodas, which are primarily, a lot of them use like fructose to sweeten them. Sports drinks, energy drinks, flavored yogurts, things like ketchup. What we've done is we've isolated fructose and fructose only. We've taken away the fiber, we've taken away those nutrients, and we're just isolating the sugar. Now think about this. If I were to hand you 5 apples in one sitting, and I said, I want you to eat all 5 of these apples, most people would struggle to do that. Why? Because there's fiber in those apples and you get full. You get these hunger, or the cues that you're satiated. Okay, you get that like really uncomfortable, I can't eat another bite. Like, you know, when you're on Thanksgiving, you eat too much turkey, you would get uncomfortably full. Our body tells us to stop, right? However, if I took those same 5 apples and I put them in a juicer and I isolate the sugar, which is the juice, right, that's coming out of those, so I isolate that fructose from all of the fiber and everything else it's packaged with, you would get 1 single glass of apple juice. We can drink, most of us have drank glasses of apple juice. Now, when you think about what that's doing to our body, you are basically inundating your system with pure fructose, which is not what it has been designed to do. You've taken away everything that it's beautifully packaged with, and you're just flooding your system, and your liver goes, whoa, 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 I can't keep up. Now, the other thing about fructose, what you'll find is that it's very rare to find fructose in your blood. Okay, the blood sugar is glucose. Well, how come? Because your liver prioritizes storage of fructose, because the rest of our body has not figured out how to handle that, since that was not the majority of our diet through our evolutionary process. So what our liver does, because our liver is the thing that like tries to filter out toxins and all that fun stuff, is it prioritizes. When it sees fructose, that's the first thing that it stores, okay? Because our cells can't use the fructose, but the liver can, to use it for like a backup battery. So you flood your system with fructose, okay? And your liver says, oh, okay, I'm gonna take all this fructose, I'm gonna take all this fructose, well, then it gets full. It can only store so much. So then what it does is it converts what it can't handle to fat, and it stores the fat in its liver, right? And that's where fatty liver disease comes from. It processes this very, very similarly as it processes alcohol, which is why you can get fatty liver from too much alcohol. You can get fatty liver from too much sugar. Specifically, fructose is a problem, okay? Fructose is a problem when we isolate it. So you have to be a little bit careful. And this is, you know, the juices and the sodas and the flavored yogurts. And, you know, if you look at like your Heinz ketchup. So when you see things like high fructose corn syrup, right? Those are just big hits on our liver, and it overloads the liver, and it says, I just cannot keep up. And it starts converting that to fat. Whew, how are we doing? Questions? Comments, concerns? Eat the fruit. Don't eat the fruit yogurt. That's where I'm going with this. Okay. Poor liver. I know our livers, we should be, man, they're the heroes. They're the real heroes. We put them through some things. and then there's people like me who love mimosas. So I'm like hammering my liver with alcohol and orange juice. Like, oh, good job, Amber. Like, maybe you should reconsider that mimosa. Yeah, the liver, the teachers of the body. Agreed, Victoria. Okay. Yes, 100%. Add the fresh fruit to the plate. Yes. So if you like yogurt, which like yogurt in and of itself isn't a problem at all. Like if you're doing unflavored, so Sarah had said, sorry for those of you who are not on the Zoom, Sarah had said we can add fresh fruit to unflavored yogurts. Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to do unsweetened yogurts and add things like a vanilla extract, right, with fresh fruit, 100%, that's fantastic. Because when you're doing that, you're still pairing like the fructose with all the fiber and all the fun things, right? As long as you're keeping those nature intended packets together, like life is good. It's when we start stripping apart those packages to add sugar to make it flavorable, that's when we're getting ourselves in trouble. The other thing to know is that when we eat any sort of sugar, whether that be a monodisaccharide or a polysaccharide, any of those. So because the liver is putting it in the bloodstream saying, hey guys, I got energy for you, here it is. You know, when your blood sugar spikes like that, then our pancreas, which is responsible for helping with that blood sugar regulation, starts excreting insulin. Okay. Let's see, do I talk about insulin next? I can talk about it now, it doesn't matter. So what insulin does is our cells actually almost have like lock and keys on them. They can't uptake glucose out of the bloodstream without something to unlock their door. And so that's what insulin does. So the pancreas senses that blood sugar has gone up and it says, oh, great, I've got some doors to open, and it puts insulin into our body. And the insulin is that key that's unlocking all of the cells saying, hey, you're allowed to take up this glucose. Let's get it out of the body. So what you're looking at here, this graph is a fluctuation. This was a diabetic patient who was wearing a continuous glucose monitor. And you're seeing that the spikes of glucose happening after eating, and then the drops that are happening after the insulin starts going to work. And then you eat again and you see a spike, and then you get a drop. Okay. Now, here's the thing about when we start eating a ton of sugars in one meal, okay, is we get really, really large spikes, and then our insulin comes out and it starts opening doors of cells and they start taking glucose, and then we get those crashes from our insulin, right? So when we put too much out there, our body matches it with insulin. Okay? It tries to remove, it gets it down to, tries to get it to like a normal level, right? We end up getting those crashes, so like mid-morning crashes, okay? And then we feed it something else, typically with sugar, because we're feeling like we're dragging ass. So we give ourselves something that'll pick me up, right? And then we get the spike, and your pancreas goes, oh, more insulin. And then we get the crash, and all of a sudden we are going like this. We get like sinusoidals happening, right, with our blood sugar. And some fluctuations normal, but it's not supposed to do this, right? It's not supposed to, this is where we get the crashes. And the other thing to keep in mind, do you remember what your brain typically runs on? What's fueling our brain? You remember?
Glucose.
It's glucose. So when our glucose levels are going like this, what's going on in your brain?
I'm losing my mind.
Exactly. You get brain fog, brain fatigue, focus issues, right? These are all related because our blood sugar isn't stable. Okay? So there's a whole lot of implications when we don't regulate properly, because we're just like constantly trying to kill our liver. Poor liver, poor liver. Okay, insulin resistance. So what is this? Okay, so you know how whenever we throw sugar into our blood and then our pancreas throws insulin at it, our bodies do what our bodies are supposed to do and it adapts. Okay, our cells can only take in so much glucose. Okay? We can't just use them or rely on them to keep our blood sugars stable. They can only take so much. So when these start getting too big and they start getting too full, they say, no, thanks, I'm good, I'm full. No, I don't want it, right? Well, that means that your blood sugar remains elevated. And so your pancreas, who's trying to bring it back down, is like, oh, okay, we're still elevated. More insulin, more insulin, more insulin. And it starts overworking. So now we've got an overworked liver and we have an overworked pancreas, and they're just trying to get your blood sugars back to normal. Okay? And what happens over time when we keep doing this, when we keep flooding our system with sugar, and then our system floods itself with insulin, we get insulin resistance. And this is where our cells start saying, no vacancy, I'm good, thanks. Okay. And this leads to elevated blood sugar levels because the insulin's no longer working as effectively. Your cells aren't opening their doors anymore. The keys are broken. Okay. You get elevated blood sugar. It leads to type 2 diabetes. This is liver diseases. And also now, because we're overburdening our pancreas, we are seeing a rise in diseases with our pancreas, namely pancreatic cancer. Crazy. And it's just because it's trying to regulate and we're just not giving it a break, right? So it's like our teachers, we're going to see a mass exodus here because they're not loved enough. Same with our organs. Our poor liver and our poor pancreas. They're like, stop working me so hard. Yeah. All right, this is where it gets kind of good. So that's the science. Questions on the science before we move on to, why is this such a big deal? But Amber, I don't drink soda. It's not a big deal. But Amber, I don't drink, juice. It's not a big deal. Questions on the science at all? Are we doing okay? I geek out a little bit because it helps me to know what I'm doing to my body. Okay. All right. All right, then let's keep moving on. So that was the science. Our poor livers, just think of them every time you inundate your system. Now let's talk about why this is such a big deal, right? Even if you think you're regulating it really well, you've got to be very careful about things like packaged foods, okay? It is estimated, concerns I have is even when I know the science, I still eat the sugar stuff. Yeah. Well, that's science too. Sugar is one of those hyperpalatable things that when we eat more, and then maybe that's something that we can talk about now too. Sugar, when we eat more, it's proven when we eat more, we want more. Okay. It's called dopamine downregulation. Okay? When sugar triggers the feel good part in our brain, it feels good to eat it. We all know that. It's the reason why when we're sad, we want sugar, right? When you're trying to just take the pain of the day away, a lot of us go to sugar. It feels good. But the problem is because our bodies are meant to adapt, what we end up having to do is eat more to get that same feeling. It's the same idea as when drug addicts keep chasing that high. Okay? Sugar has addict-like repercussions too, right? We get that hit of dopamine and then we want that again. And so we eat more and we eat more and our body adapts and it takes more to get the same hit. And it's this terrible cycle, terrible cycle. Yeah, addressing the concern. I don't address that too much only because there's a whole lot of mental, there's a whole lot that has to be addressed there. I feel like that could be its own presentation. How do we flip the switch in our brain? Addiction and addiction-like behavior. That's a little intense. So this is, yeah. But I am happy to make that maybe that's a good one to do too. Okay, how can we address the mindset so that we can overcome this? So here there are at least 61 names for sugar, if not more. So there's another, I'm not going to go through them all, obviously, but there are just so many different types of sugars running around in our packaged foods. And they're there for several reasons, flavor or sustainability, like shelf life. Sometimes they add color, fruit juice, all these, there's lots of reasons why they're added. But one of the biggest is that they make things taste good and they create that cycle that we were just talking about, where you want that dopamine hit, so you go back to the food, okay? Don't be, food, manufacturers know what they're doing. Okay. In fact, there's something in food. It's called the bliss point. It's how much sugar can they add to make it taste good without being too much. Okay. This is like all research stuff. Okay. Manufacturers know what they're doing. They are manipulating us heavily. They get away with as much as they can, so we keep coming back. It's whew. Okay, so things like sports drinks. I know that we think we're so cute when we're trying to refill electrolytes after a big workout. Please don't do it with sports drinks. Most of us are not working out hard enough, long enough, sweating enough that we have any need for this. Okay, give yourself some water, you'll be okay. Eat a pickle, you'll be fine. We don't need sports drinks. And our poor kids, I mean, we're raising them to be the same, right? Like after a soccer game, our kids get Gatorade, right? There's no need, right? How you kick the ball one time and now they get, what did it say? 21 grams of added sugar? Like, no, guys, they don't need this. I assure you they will be fine. Okay, there's 21 grams of added sugar. The other thing to be aware of when you're looking at things like labels is that because sugar has been launched into the limelight lately, which is fantastic. I'm glad it has been. It's time for us to start attacking the effects of sugar. Fat had its heyday. We're seeing a shift now in mindset, which is really, really good. But companies are getting really smart about this. And so what they're doing is they're fracturing their ingredients so that they can be listed later on in our ingredient list. Because if you've never read about how to read a label, the ingredients that have the most in a product are listed first, right? It's listed in order of the most used ingredients. So in this case, the number one ingredient, Gatorade, is water. The second ingredient is sugar. The third ingredient is dextrose, which is sugar. Later on, you see sucrose, which is sugar. Okay. What companies have started doing is fracturing up sugars in different forms so that it appears like there's less of it, and then it can come later on in their ingredients list. Manufacturers know what they're doing. It's a manipulation game. Be careful. Okay. Apple juice. Apple juice concentrate. Well, that's fructose. All they did was juice the apple, take away all of the fiber. It took away the beautiful packaging. It's now just fructose. 28 grams of sugar in that little bottle. Okay. These milks, the Horizon milks, okay, just sugar. This is taco seasoning. This is the one I want to get to. Seasonings. Watch your seasonings. Even if you think you're doing good, you might be accidentally having added sugar through seasonings. Okay, there's sugar in this Lowry's taco seasoning. There's sugar in Johnny's. I know, and I feel bad for attacking Johnny's because I know everybody loves Johnny's. I get it. Sugar is the second ingredient of Johnny's. You're making everything palatable because you're putting sugar on it. And it's doing that, oh, this tastes good. Oh, the dopamine, that's that hit. Okay, I'm sorry, but Johnny's sugar. Garlic salt. This is the one I mentioned in the video when I was trying to make the pizza crust. Garlic salt, sugar. Like, why? Why is that there? So just be careful. This is bouillon cubes, sugar, ranch, sugar, Heinz, lots of sugar, lots of sugar. Be careful with your ketchups. The one thing that I want to say, you guys, though, is that there are alternatives. There are absolutely alternatives. This is not to say you can't ever have ketchup again. This is not to say you can't ever have ranch again. It's not to say you can't have bouillon. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying be careful of the choices that you're making, because things like taco seasoning, for example, you can make that you can just buy the individual seasonings and make a big vat of it, and then you can have it on hand. Like, that's what I do. I just make my own mix. It doesn't have sugar in it. Then I get to control the seasonings, and then I can also control things like how spicy it is, because I'm a wimp, right? So sometimes these little packets are too much for me. Okay, so it's not to say you can't have them. It's just be more aware. Make like this taco seasoning is really easy to make. Garlic salt. You can just get pure garlic and salt and parsley. There you go. Garlic salt without sugar. Ranch, really easy to make by hand. Okay, but if you don't want to make it by hand, there are also some what am I trying to say? Brands out there that are really trying to do better. Things like Primal, what is it? Primal Kitchen. I think Primal Kitchen has a ranch that doesn't have any added sugar. Okay, so it's not to say you can't have them. It's just choose better. Just choose a better, look at the ingredients list and choose one that doesn't have sugar. They don't all have sugar, right? Heinz, guilty, high fructose corn syrup. There it is, bam. Don't get it. I think Primal Kitchen makes a ketchup. You can buy the Primal Kitchen, or I think Heinz even has a lower sugar version if you wanted to still get Heinz. Yogurts are just notorious. Don't buy flavored yogurts. It's just fructose in a yogurt. Buy plain yogurt and then add your own goods to it. Add your own fruit, add your own vanilla extract, add cinnamon. You know, if you want to add flavor, find a different way to do that yourself, okay? Instead of buying them this way. Like 15 grams of yogurt in a Go-Gurt. What are we doing? So just be careful. And then I got a little bit bored of doing this because I think you get the point. Spaghetti sauce, crackers have sugar, jerky, be careful. Like I love Tillamook no sugar jerky, but this is their not non-sugar, and like the second ingredient is brown sugar. Pickles are fabulous snack, but be careful because like the bread and butter kind, sugar. Most sausages have added sugar. Okay, so just be aware and try to find an alternative. Like most dill type pickles don't have added sugar. So just maybe make that subtle change. Okay. And you're cutting out all of this and it adds up. This is the problem. So if you think about, for example, yeah, totally. Sarah asked about the curing process. So a lot of meats are cured with sugar, and that's just to make them like more shelf stable. And typically, basically, you cure it by setting it in a lot of salt and a lot of sugar, right? And that makes the meat okay to eat later, but that is rinsed off in the process before it's packaged. So if you see something like bacon and it says cured with salt and sugar, typically most of that sugar is washed off. It's only there to like make it suitable for consumption later. So that's okay to do. But if it's higher up on the ingredients list, no, I don't know if it's hickory smoked, applewood smoked, sometimes they use sugar as a flavoring. So you have to be a little bit careful with meats because sugar is a curing agent. Okay, so if it's being cured with, typically that's removed in the processing, in the process before it's packaged. But if they're using it as an ingredient for flavor, that's not removed later on. Does that make sense? Okay, so sometimes it's not very explicit. It doesn't say cured with sugar, but you'll see something like and then less than 2%. Now this is on meats. I can't say the same for things like crackers, but it'll say like less than 2% of, and it'll say sugar on there. That typically is an indicator that it's also just being used in the curing process, and then it's washed off before it's packaged. It's a really good question, though, Sarah. Other questions? Okay. And the reason that we need to be careful about this, okay? Like let's say spaghetti used to be, it's still one of my kids' favorite. It used to be a staple in our household, right? So let's think about that one meal, that one spaghetti meal. Okay, so we've got the noodles, and we know that noodles are broken down into, those are complex carb. We can talk about that at some point too. Like this is not to say that noodles are always bad all the time. I'm not trying to say that, but we know that noodles are broken down into sugars, right? So we have the noodles with the sugars, and then we topped it with a tomato sauce, which you best believe I wasn't looking at the ingredients. So that was one that was high in sugar. And then we would use Italian sweet sausage because that's delicious. Well, high fructose corn syrup is in the sausage. So you think about this bowl of spaghetti that we're having, and it's just sugar on top of sugar on top of sugar. I didn't know that. I had no idea to look for that. I didn't know that there would be so much sugar in a regular like spaghetti sauce. Okay, but this is how we get ourselves in trouble. because the noodles on themselves, like in and of themselves, if you're having those in moderation, isn't a problem. But then we layer that with a sugar sauce, and then we put sugar meat in it, and all of a sudden it's just like, this is when our liver goes haywire, and it's like, whoa, dude, I don't need it. I don't need all this sugar. Okay, so this is why you got to be a little bit careful with the sneaky things that you might not be aware. Like, oh, I think I did well today, and then you start looking at all the ingredients. You're like, oh. And it's like flavored yogurts with granola, right? That was touted for a long time because you can make that low fat. That's part of the low fat movement. Well, you can have your yogurt and your granola. Yeah, okay, yeah, and also be careful, because there's lots of sugar in the flavored yogurt. There's lots of sugar in most granolas. And then if you pair that with anything like an apple juice or your vanilla latte that has a vanilla syrup, just think about the hit of sugar, right? So right off in the morning, you wake up and you have your yogurt with your granola and your latte, and your blood sugar just spikes, right? And then we wonder why we have these giant crashes a few hours later, or we have focus issues at work, or we get really tired in the afternoon, and our blood sugar's all over the place. And that was just the start of the day, right? So be careful. What answer? I'm sorry, Victoria, what answer? About the curing process? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so sugar and salt are the two main forms of making sure that we can consume the meat later, right? So they basically just stick the meat, like pork, like if we're talking about bacon, right? They stick it in a vat of salt and or sugar, so that it's what we call cured, so it's consumable later, so it kills the bacteria, right? And then in the curing process, what they do is they rinse that off. So if they're using that as a curing agent to kill a bacteria to make it consumable, right, then they rinse that off before packaging. So very little of that sugar typically ends up in our digestive systems, right? But that's different than using sugar as a flavoring agent. So you have to be a little bit careful. If it says cured with, it's fine. If it's like less than 2%, that typically means cured with, so it's fine. But if it's like the first or like the second or third ingredient, be a little bit careful, because that means they're actually adding it for flavor. So that is something that's going to spike our blood sugar. But in the curing process, it's rinsed off before it's packaged. Questions? Are we doing okay? I know it's a lot to handle at once. All right, so don't overwhelm your liver. Don't make your pancreas work so hard. Be aware of labels. I think one of the most annoying parts in my journey, at least, was having to read labels. I'm at a point now where I'm like really comfortable doing it, and I've got kind of my staple stuff. I remember in the beginning though, I just felt so awkward reading labels in the grocery store, but let's be honest, nobody's paying attention to you. Right, so give yourself a minute to look at the labels. If there's something on there that you don't like, put it back and find a different option. There are a lot, and that's the other thing. Like I said, the movement is starting to change. People started making demands, right? Manufacturers are going to make what the people are going to put money on. We're now starting to see this shift in the no sugar type items. Okay, so you actually have a lot of options out there, really nice, now, as opposed to when it was only Heinz ketchup. So if you wanted ketchup, you had to have the ones with fructose. Now you have options. So take a peek and see what you can find. Artificial sweeteners. This is tough. So I talked about the gut bacteria earlier and about how important that was with our digestive process, and it uses the fiber. So here's a problem with these artificial sweeteners. There's a lot of problems with them. First of all, it's documented that they kill our gut bacteria, okay, which creates problems for us. They can make us really gassy. They can give us things like diarrhea. They can make us feel really, really bad. And then when we harm our gut bacteria, that's been connected with things with like the same issues as when we overload our system with glucose. So that's been connected with things like heart disease and elevated blood sugars. Like these are all interconnected. So even though we use an artificial sweetener and we're really proud of ourselves because they're no calorie or they're low calorie, or they don't get the same type of blood spike, they are causing damage. In fact, I would argue they're causing more damage because we're killing the necessary bacteria to help those digestive processes, and they create other issues. Okay. The other thing, and there's a star next to monk fruit, and I'll talk about monk fruit here in just a second, because monk fruit right now is the star of the show. If anybody's tried to do like a low sugar or switch to keto or anything like that, you've probably heard of monk fruit. So we'll talk about monk fruit here in just a minute. The other ones listed here have been proven to harm gut bacteria. Okay. The other problem with most sweeteners is that they're actually sweeter than sugar, sweeter than sucrose. Okay, that's sweeter than. So what that does is it alters our palate completely. Our understanding of sweet changes completely. If we are consistently eating artificial sweeteners that are not just a little bit sweeter, like I think stevia is 2, or is it monk fruit? Oh shoot, I can't, what, they're like 200 to 300 times sweeter than sugar. Aspartame sweeter than sugar, hundreds of times sweeter. So what happens is that our palate changes to adjust to this high level of sweetness, and it takes away our ability to taste true sweetness. Like somebody who's used to artificial sweeteners can eat a strawberry and not think anything of it. They don't taste the natural sweetness in the strawberry. If you cleanse your palate, if you allow yourself to get off things like high sugar and high artificial sweeteners, you can eat a strawberry and think that's just as sweet as dessert. Right? You start getting the ability to taste the natural sweetness, but with artificial sweeteners, they kill that ability, right? So like, you eat an apple and you're like, this isn't all that good. And you're like, well, it's actually pretty sweet. There was a story I was listening to, one of my favorite podcasts, which is Mind Pump. For anybody who wants a good like nutrition and fitness podcast, it's Mind Pump. And they were talking about how one of them, Adam, had gotten off of sugars, and he picked up an apple and he was eating the apple and he was like, oh my God, this is the best apple I've ever had. What kind of apple is? He was like asking this guy where he got this apple. And the guy was like, it's just a regular apple. But he didn't recognize how sweet apples could be because his palate had been completely, changed due to the artificial sweeteners. Yes, thank you. Victoria says it kills your taste like COVID. That's what artificial sweeteners do. And so they're not a better alternative. I know we want them to be, but they're not. The other thing is that if you're just replacing sugar with artificial sweeteners, you're not doing anything about the cravings themselves. You're still doing this perpetuating, chasing this sweet high. Okay? You're not actually addressing the issue. So for me, it's more about solutions, not substitutions. You know what I mean? Like one is not the same. Now, monk fruit, the jury's still out on monk fruit. It as of now, the FDA has not found there to be the same type of impact on our gut health. Okay, and it doesn't cause the same types of blood sugar spikes. So right now, monk fruit is actually looking like a pretty okay alternative. I am choosing not to go down that road because one, I want to keep my sweet cravings curbed. I don't want to play into that. And the other is that I don't want to mess with my palate. I really, really enjoy berries with freshly whipped cream. And I don't want that to go away because I'm consuming something that is so much sweeter often. That being said, though, if you are trying to make something that has some sweetness to it for whatever reason, monk fruit might be a good alternative. Like I said, the jury's still out on monk fruit. The other ones listed there, though, have been proven to have a negative impact on our gut health, and it's just not worth it. Like, it is something that's sweet worth feeling bad later for? Like, that's arguable. And questions about that? Okay. Artificial sweeteners, blah, don't do it. Just don't do it. Right? Solutions, not substitutions. How are we doing? Okay. Okay, we're almost to the, let's see, what do we got next? Okay, so what to do about it? Let's say that you're in a situation where you have addicted-like behaviors concerning sugar. We've all been there, right? I still have some moderation issues myself that I have to work on. I have to be very careful because I know about this process. If you feed it, you want more. Okay. So there are a couple things that you can do to help. First of all, create barriers to access. So this might seem obvious, but it's so unbelievably important. And when I say barriers to access, I'm not saying don't tell yourself you can't have it. That never works. There's a psychological component there. Don't tell yourself I can never have sugar again. That's not reasonable. That doesn't make sense. Don't do that. But also don't put it in your cabinet so it's easy for you to grab at 11 o'clock at night. Okay. So this is what I would recommend. Allow yourself to have like sweets, but don't put them in your house, which means if you at 11 o'clock at night really do want some ice cream, or you really do want a candy bar or what have you, make it so that you have to get in your car and go to the corner store and get it. Create a barrier. So it's not that you can't have it, it's that you're going to have to work to get it, right? It's really going to make you slow down and be like, how much do I really want this? And if the answer is I want it enough to get in my car and go get it, then allow that for yourself. Does that make sense? But slow yourself down and make that intentional. Creating those types of barriers really make you think through if this is something that you actually want to do, or is this an impulse eat? Okay. Like for example, this isn't the same, it's not regarding sweets, but it's a good example because I have a tendency to overeat nuts. I really like nuts, most varieties. Okay. Pistachio nuts are really, really easy to eat handfuls and handfuls and handfuls of. Okay. So I have to create a barrier for myself with pistachio nuts. I have to buy the ones that have the shells on, because then I have to actively go through and break the shells and get the nut out. So I can't eat handfuls at a time. Does that make sense? So just create, don't say you can't have it. Just don't make it accessible either. Okay. The other thing you can do is choose better most of the time. What do I mean by that? That means be intentional. If you want to have your Saturday donut with your coffee, have it, but know that that's coming. And it's almost like financials, like you're allocating this, that, or the other, right? I know that I want my Saturday donut. Okay, that's fine. That means I'm going to choose better Friday night. I'm not going to have my, I'm not going to have a dessert Friday night. I'm going to choose better most of the time so that I can allocate this sort of sugar splurge. Does that make sense? So allow yourself these things. Yeah, eat this, not that. That's a book, isn't it, Sarah? Eat this, not that. That's a thing. I've heard that before. I don't think I've read that one, but okay. The other thing that you can do is if you're getting a craving, for example, chocolate. Okay? If you are a chocolate lover, I'm guilty. Start choosing darker chocolates. Darker chocolates have less, and then do it. And when you crash, you'll be okay. Yeah, there you go. Victoria says, and do it when a sugar crash will be okay in your day. Yeah, set yourself up for success. But like if you do want to allow yourself like chocolate, choose a dark chocolate, right? Milk chocolate's got a lot of sugar. The darker you get, the higher the percentage of the darker, the less sugar you get. Okay. If you can work yourself into like an 80% or higher, that's probably best. But man, if you're switching from a milk chocolate to a 60%, that can seem like a pretty big jump. So allow yourself that. Okay, so that's in the interest of choosing better most of the time. The other thing you can do that falls under choose better most of the time, if you decide to splurge, right? Like let's say your weakness is ice cream. Okay, so have one scoop instead of the whole pint. Choose better most of the time. We've talked about this scale, right? Where you can, I forgot what it was called. What am I saying? I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, point is that it's not about being perfect, right? It's about thinking about, well, in this moment, this is what I want, but I'm going to choose better for myself. Here's one that maybe you didn't know about. Curing or trying to fight cravings, like sugar cravings. If you indulge in a different palatable food, there's the three big ones, right? We've got sugar and fats and salt. Okay, these are the three most palatable foods in our diets. If you've got a sugar craving, eat something salty. A lot of the times that will stop your craving altogether. Okay? If you feed your body another palatable food, that can work wonders in the craving. So let's say you're like, oh my gosh, I just want that whole pie. Go eat a pickle and see how you feel after that. Okay, give yourself time to fight that craving. Now, here's the other thing though. If you eat the pickle and you're still having it, go have a small piece of pie. It's okay, right? Remove the shame. And then of course, avoid processed foods because those have a lot of those hidden sugars, which are creating this like, you want more when you eat more. And so you may unintentionally be creating your own cravings because you had something that had added sugar and you didn't realize. Okay, so just to cut out the processed foods. Another like choose better most of the time. I just went back and was like, well, you can also do things like if you're craving something sweet, choose like an apple with like peanut butter or nut butter on it. Okay, that's another thing you can do is start pairing your sweets with something that's got protein in it because protein is satiating. Okay, so have the apple with, some peanut butter or have your piece of dark chocolate with peanut butter. Be careful though, because peanut butter is another one of those things that can have a lot of added sugar. So make sure you're choosing a good peanut butter. Okay, make your at-home Reese's cups with dark chocolate and a nut butter with no added sugar. Yeah, and eating slowly. Yeah, totally. Eating slowly is a really good, Victoria said, eat it slowly. That's a hard skill to learn, but a good one, eating slowly. All right, questions. How are we doing? I think that's, oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. Okay, questions about this? Be nice to your liver. It works really hard for you. Nothing? Stunned into silence. You're just amazed at what our body can do. Yeah, it's a lot of info. Victoria said that's a lot of info that I didn't know. Yeah. Agreed. It's a lot of info. Okay. If there are no immediate questions, you can always DM me. I'm more than happy to talk nutrition shop. Yes, that's a good question. So on Facebook, Terry said, who's my mom, by the way? Hi, Mom. If you have fatty liver, can you fix it? I should have said that. Yes. Type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, these are all reversible 100% with changes in diet. If you've had it for a while, it can take a little bit longer. Some of the damage can be permanent, but they are reversible. That's the beautiful thing about recognizing how our body processes stuff, is that if you have fatty liver, you can reverse it with diet. If you have type 2 diabetes, you can reverse it with diet. Okay. That's a great question. It's reversible. What about cane sugar? So cane sugar is just the same. So that's like table sugar. It's all the same. It's all processed the same. It gets broken down as glucose. We store what we need. What we don't need is turned to fat. So samesies, right? And like brown sugar is just table sugar with molasses, right? These are all just different versions of the same thing. And they're all processed the same way. Okay, our liver tries to convert everything to glucose. It can't do anything with fructose, so it just sits there and stores it for later. Yeah, same thing. And if you're thinking about like, well, if I have to choose, if I'm going to choose something sweet, is it better to choose something that's got cane sugar, or is it better to choose something that's got like an artificial sweetener? I would 100% go with the cane sugar. Choose real over artificial if you can. Okay. Now I realize some people have limitations because cane sugar will create a blood spike. So if you're diabetic, not a good idea, right? So this is all kind of personal to your situation too. Okay, but it doesn't have cane sugar, like regular sugar stuff. It doesn't have the same effect on our gut health as those artificial sweeteners do. Those cause a lot of damage. So just be careful. With the exception, I want to make it clear, with the exception of monk fruit, the jury's still out. So. Other questions? Okay. Yeah, the avocado is good fat, right? Yeah, this is not a presentation on fat. In fact, I think we might do fat and cholesterol next week because cholesterol is another one of those things that gets such a terrible reputation. Let's talk shop on cholesterol. But yes, avocado is good fat. Eat the avocado, absolutely. Talk one day about how to get over the sugar cravings. Yes, that is a whole mindset thing for sure. Yes, I'll put that on we need to talk about mindset shifts regarding sugar specifically. Let's do that, Raylene. Okay, I'm gonna let you all go. I know it's late. I so appreciate you joining me tonight. And if you have any other lingering questions, please feel free to DM me. I'm more than happy to answer those for you. Thank you so much for being here. And I will see you next time, okay? Till next time, eat more, eat well, and eat happy.